It might have finally happened. We may actually have a reason to use a detachment that isn't the Stormlance or the Gladius Task Force. With the latest data slate that released today, we got 3 brand new detachments, and the first one we're going to talk about in this video is the new Dark Angels one, and the real question is, do we now finally have a good, fluffy, and usable detachment? So let's dive right in and take a look. The new detachment is called the Wrath of the Rock, and it is, if nothing else, I think, incredibly thematic. It is really rewarding you for bringing this full tri-wing list with some fantastic boosts and bonuses for not only your Deathwing and Ravenwing units, but also the oft-forgotten Greenwing, with some great buffs to really help make the most out of anything from your Intercessors to your Eradicators to even some of your vehicles like your Dreadnoughts. The only units that don't really get a huge amount from this detachment are your poor vehicles, but yeah, despite that, there are a couple of things in here that can definitely improve them a little bit. So you really can go to town with this in terms of list building. You can bring as much Dark Angel specific stuff as you want, or as a little. Most of it will still get a good benefit, but I think really if you want to make the most out of this detachment, you will want to be bringing a lot of those classic unique Dark Angel units. Deathwing Knights, your Inner Circle Companions, the Black Knights, your Ravenwing Command Squads, they are all going to be absolute staples for this detachment. And then also the Ravenwing Dark Shroud, which is already very, very strong and taken in most lists. In this detachment, it goes to almost mandatory, I think. So the main detachment rule is called Dutiful Tendency. This is a hark back to the old transhuman rule that the Terminators had for the Dark Angels in last edition, now in keeping, of course, with the slightly toned down version we've seen throughout 10th edition, but it is still a very, very good defensive buff. It grants all of your infantry and also all of your mounted units -1 to be wounded if the incoming attack into them is higher strength than their toughness. Now, this is in melee and at range, so now your Toughness 5 Deathwing Knights or Black Knights will be much, much more durable against anything Strength 6 and above. And this isn't just Deathwing or Ravenwing, even things like your Toughness 4 Marines like your Hellblasters or Intercessors will now only be wounded on 3s rather than 2s from anything like crack missiles to las cannons to power fists to even volcano cannons. It is a really, really strong buff, and it makes almost your entire army just so much more durable and survivable as you are either moving up the board to get in position or just sitting back and holding onto an objective. It is really good. Now, yes, it does lose some of the utility that you get from the other detachments, things like army-wide advance and charge from the Stormlance or the sheer flexibility of the doctrines from the Gladius. You will miss those. But if you just want a durable army that will not die, this one is going to be fantastic to play. And I also think this detachment rule is part and parcel of why I've said the Dark Shroud is so good again, because that, of course, brings the aura of -1 to be hit, so that can stack alongside this and get you a lot of your army at -1 to be hit and -1 to be wounded. And on something like your Deathwing Knights, that can now get you a unit that is 4 wounds, Toughness 5, 2 up save, 4 up invuln, that is -1 to be hit, -1 to be wounded, and -1 to incoming damage. Essentially, even something that is generally quite good for anti-infantry shooting, something like the Imperial Knights Avenger Gatling Cannon on a Knight Crusader, will only end up doing about 3 damage with all of those stacked buffs into your Deathwing Knights. So one of the guns of one of the biggest, most expensive models in the game isn't even going to kill one Deathwing Knight. Now, of course, the Knight Crusader does have other guns, so I'm not saying that it won't do some damage to them. I'm just saying even really good, dedicated anti-infantry shooting will now be struggling with the amount of buffs and layers of defenses that this detachment will help you put onto some of your units. It is a fantastic set of buffs and a combo that will just improve anything from your Deathwing Knights, even things like big blobs of Ravenwing Black Knights with a command squad that can get you 9 Toughness 5 bodies that are going to be speeding up the board really quickly and will just be incredibly difficult to get rid of through that combination of -1 to wound as well as potentially -1 to be hit if you've got a Dark Shroud near them. So really, really good, and does also kind of combo really well with a few of our other units. On the enhancement front, we're also doing quite well in this detachment. We've got 3 very good and 1 all right choice. The Tempered in Battle aura is probably the weakest of the bunch. It isn't amazing, but at the same time, it's only 10 points, so it can quite easily be slotted in. This enhancement gives friendly Astartes units within 6 inches of the bearer the ability to re-roll their Battle Shock and Leadership tests. So it's nothing spectacular or really, really amazing, but if you wanted that extra reliability and reassurance that you aren't going to be failing many Battle Shock or Leadership tests, then for 10 points, this could be nice to have if you've got a character for it that you're going to be keeping back near to some important objective holding units that you just really don't want to get battle shocked. Ancient Weapons is the priciest enhancement, but it is incredibly good. It's 25 points, but it grants the bearer +2 strength to all of their melee weapons and also +1 AP and +1 damage. So this is really good on things like a chaplain on a bike. It can boost them to strength 8, -2 AP and 3 damage, or strength 9, -2 AP and 4 damage on the charge if they're with an Outrider squad, which is insanely good. With their 5 attacks and the +1 to wound buff, he alone can put about 7 wounds into an enemy toughness 9 monster or vehicle, or kill just over 2 Alarus Custodians all by himself, which is pretty damn impressive. Next up, we have the Deathwing Assault enhancement. This is 15 points and also gets you some fantastic utility. This can go on a Deathwing model with Deep Strike, so essentially your Terminator characters, and it allows the bearer and his units to be set up via Deep Strike in the first, second, or third battle round. So getting you essentially turn 1 Deep Strike, which is really, really nice. There is still, of course, that 9-inch restriction, so it's not going to get you a guaranteed turn 1 charge or anything, but putting a unit of Terminators behind some cover in turn 1 can really threaten an enemy backfield objective, or just, if nothing else, put your opponent on the back foot right from the start of the game. So it does have a lot of use and utility for that fairly cheap 15 points, I think. The final option from the enhancement front is the 10-point Lord of the Ravenwing. This grants a Ravenwing model and his unit the ability to re-roll advance and charge rolls, so making it much more likely you will be able to move up and get onto an objective or get a charge off. And with your solid 12-inch move on things like your Outriders, as well as the option to advance and charge with a strat, as we'll see in just a minute, that is an amazing bit of utility. It averages out to, I think, about an extra 3 inches between the D6 advance roll and the 2d6 charge roll. So it is, for 10 points, essentially getting you about, on average, an extra 3 inches of movement on that unit. So it's really quite good value from that perspective. But I think just the sheer reliability of being able to re-roll those rolls can be well worth the 10 points, just to make sure you get that clutch, advance, or charge result that you need right when you need it. So I just think overall, great detachment rule, great enhancements, but it doesn't end there, because we are also blessed with some very, very good stratagems. Starting things off is Inescapable Justice. This is a hefty 2 command points, but it lets a character unit pick a second enemy unit within 12 inches of them to be your Oath of Moment target. So essentially, you use this strat after your initial Oath of Moment target is destroyed, and that character unit can pick another one. So if all of your army's firepower goes into a backfield tank that you wanted to be destroyed, so you picked that as your oath, but then your chaplain and his Deathwing Knights are kind of getting into position to charge into another unit of Marines on an objective, you can then pick that unit of Marines as your second oath target after you've destroyed the tank, and they will be getting full rerolls to hit against them when they do crash into them in your subsequent charge phase. So it is really useful, don't get me wrong, it is quite pricey at 2 command points, and it can be a bit niche because you won't always manage to destroy your oath target even with that buff to reroll all of your attacks into them. But on those occasions where you have managed to destroy your oath target and there's a really juicy enemy unit that you want to get rerolls into as well, this can definitely come in handy. And it's a strat that if you've got the 2 command points spare and there is a prime enemy target to use it on, you'll be really, really glad to have. The one command point Tactical Mastery is another strat that benefits actually a load of units in your army. So in the movement phase, you can put this on an Astartes unit and it can advance and still charge. Now, if you pick a Ravenwing unit to put this on, it can shoot and charge even if it's fallen back as well. So it makes your Ravenwing units that bit more slippery and being able to go from combat to combat. But on everything else, it gives anything from your Inner Circle Companions to your Deathwing Knights to even your Redemptor Dreadnoughts the ability to advance and charge, which is huge. And on some of your units, like your fairly slow 5-inch move Deathwing Knights, giving them an extra d6 inches of movement can make them so much more effective and so much more viable. So this is a strat that I think you will be using a lot on things like your Deathwing units and of course on the Lion himself. Talking about the Lion's Will is up next. This is also one command point, and in your command phase you can pick a unit of yours that is within engagement range of an enemy unit, and they get +1 to their OC, and also if they're Greenwing, so essentially if they are not Ravenwing, Deathwing or a vehicle unit, they also get +1 to hit. Now this may seem a tad underwhelming at first, but it's really not. +1 to hit in melee can be great on things like your assault intercessors and that sort of thing, but that is, in my opinion, just the cherry on top. The main use of this stratagem is stealing objectives for you. So if you are fighting over an objective, you can now, on demand for one command point, just double things like the OC value of your Deathwing Knights, taking them from OC1 to OC2. So it makes most of your units in the army so good at just out-muscling an objective from an enemy now. So while it may not be the most exciting strat and it may be a bit understated, from a sheer competitive standpoint, this one is incredible. It is so good at helping you to deny an enemy some victory points, and even just one turn of denying your opponent, 5 victory points or something can absolutely turn a game in your favor. So it's really strong. The +1 to hit, as I said, is almost like a nice cherry on top. For me, the real use of this is just flipping an objective from your opponent on demand for one command point, which is incredibly good. Next up, we have another really good strat that I love from this detachment. The Relics of the Dark Age is also one command point. You put it on an infantry or a mounted unit in your army in the shooting phase, and their ranged weapons get +2 to their strength for the phase. So now your Intercessor's bolt rifles are strength 6, your Hellblasters are now strength 10 when they're overcharged, even things like your Eradicators benefit going from strength 9 to strength 11. And these hit some really key important breakpoints. It can, in the case of your Hellblasters going into toughness 9 vehicles, be the equivalent of +2 to wound, which is just incredibly good. A unit of 10 Hellblasters going into a toughness 9 tank go from doing about 8 damage in total to now doing 14 damage with this strat when they overcharge. So they are almost doubling their output. And when you add someone like Azrael to give them sustained hits, they are just absolutely deadly now into anything that is toughness 5, toughness 9, or toughness 10 when you put this strat on them. But even on things like your Intercessors or heavy Intercessors with their sort of bolt rifle style weapons, just boosting them to strength 6 or strength 7 in the case of the heavy Intercessors does make them much better at going into weaker chaff units, and they will just mow down guardsmen and even other marines and that sort of target so much more effectively with this strat. So it can just be an incredibly good, cheap utility strat for shooting an opponent off an objective that you may not have just quite managed to wipe out before. Armor of Contempt we won't cover again, but it is actually really good in this detachment. It is some extra durability, which on top of your -1 to be wounded from the detachment rule can be utterly horrific at keeping things like your Terminators and even your biker units alive against pretty much every bit of enemy firepower that may be coming their way. The last strat is another banger. This is Leonine Aggression. This is done at the end of your opponent's charge phase, and it lets a unit that is within 3 inches of an enemy unit declare a charge into that enemy unit. Or if the unit you pick is one of your Deathwing units, then they can declare that charge if they're within 6 inches. So this is essentially a super strong, fantastically good counterpunch style rule that can drop some Deathwing Knights into an enemy unit that wasn't expecting them, and it can actually also be comboed with the Lion's Will strat, so you charge into the enemy in their charge phase, you fight, and if you survive, hopefully you will, in your subsequent command phase you can pop the Lion's Will, and even if they thought they were going to be able to jump onto an objective and take it, you can now outmuscle them on it and deny them what they thought was a fairly safe objective. It does just have some fantastic utility, and it grants a big threat radius around a lot of your models that your opponent won't want to get too close to in case you do charge into them in their own charge phase. So for one command point, it's a really good deterrent and essentially a better heroic intervention for cheaper. So to me, this just feels like an absolute steal. As I said, to me, this detachment just feels incredible. It's got some really strong rules spread out throughout the enhancements, the stratagems, and the main detachment rule itself. It feels fun and fluffy and rewarding for all Dark Angel players, whether you are a fan of Ravenwing or Deathwing or Greenwing or all of them mixed together. It is just really, really nice to have a strong, viable detachment option that isn't one from the main Marine Codex, so I am a really, really big fan of this. Of course, we don't finish there, because that isn't all that makes this detachment and the Dark Angels good now. We've also had the benefit of a few big changes to our Codex itself. In particular, the Lion has had some very welcome and arguably long overdue buffs to his rules. So the Lion has had his Primarch of the First Legion abilities mixed up a bit, and All Secrets Revealed is now gone. That rule is now the Mist-Wreathed Shadow Realms rule, and that allows him in your command phase, if he isn't engaged with any enemy units, to just jump up and off the board and go into strategic reserves, which is, I don't need to tell you, bonkers good. It's not at the end of the enemy turn like a lot of other uppy downy tricks are, it's in your command phase, so when you will be doing this, you will be able to have seen what secondaries you've got, and you will be able to much more effectively plan around where it's going to be good to bring the Lion down and where he is going to have the biggest impact. What this also means is that you can potentially use this in battle round 1. So if you go first, as long as you deploy the Lion on the board, in your command phase you can jump him straight up into strategic reserves, and then in the enemy turn 1 after you finished your turn, because he started the game on the board, he can drop back in from reserves and you can deep strike him in a really threatening position for a potential turn 2 charge, or to just put a Primarch right where your opponent wasn't expecting him and mess up their battle plans with some sort of psychological warfare. It is a really strong ability and is a huge improvement over the one he had before, which was All Secrets Revealed, which was always a bit kind of janky to use in my opinion. One of his other options, the Martial Exemplar choice, has also changed. This no longer gives +1 to hit in melee for nearby Astartes units. Instead, it gives reroll hit and wound rolls of 1 in melee to the same aura. So anything within 6 inches that is an Astartes unit. This is so much better, because the units that you really wanted near the Lion, things like your Deathwing Knights or your Inner Circle Companions, because of how they were run, they were often hitting on 2s anyway, and the Lion himself obviously hits on 2s. So +1 to hit didn't really do much a lot of the time, and they got no benefit from it. Now, rerolling hit rolls and wound rolls of 1 does make a huge improvement to them. And if nothing else, even if he is off by himself, the Lion loves this update. His strike profile goes from doing about 16 damage to an Imperial Knight to now doing a reliable 20. So this ability alone on just him, without any other units being impacted, improves his own output by nearly 25%, which is insanely good. The sweep profile, by comparison, now gets him essentially 1 extra Terminator killed, so without the rerolls to hit and wound of 1 compared to having them, he wipes out 2 Terminators instead of 3 like he does with the buff. So any toughness 5, 2-up save, 4-up invuln profiles that he goes into, he can now kill about 3 of them rather than 2 if you choose this option, which isn't actually too shabby. Aside from those abilities, he also got a long overdue change, in my opinion, to his Emperor's Shield rule. This no longer does the reflecting mortal wounds that it did before, which was a nice ability, don't get me wrong, but I know a lot of other people, just tended to forget about it when you were in the heat of battle. Now it's got a much better effect that you will remember to use. It gives him essentially the same rule as the new detachment does, where he is at -1 to be wounded against any attacks that are higher strength than his toughness. Effectively, anything strength 10 and above is now going to have a much harder time wounding the lion, and las cannons and that sort of thing, but also when he's in melee, things like knights with their Thunderstrike gauntlet will now be at -1 to wound him, and that is huge for keeping him alive. Something like a Knight Gallant with the strike profile on a Thunderstrike gauntlet goes from having a 42% chance of insta-killing the lion without the shield buff to now with that -1 to wound buff only having a 19% chance. So it can, in some situations, make him effectively twice as durable against some of those really big, scary attacks that could feasibly threaten him. So some really good changes for the lion, and also he hasn't gone up in points, so he's just got flat buffs. And I mean, he wasn't an auto take before, but he was bordering on pretty good. Now with these buffs and no points increase, he is just fantastic, I think. I'll say again, I just think the Dark Angels have done so well from this data slate. They've even caught some small side buffs just from the regular Marine units that have had drops. You've got things like Aggressors dropping down 20 points, Hellblasters dropping 1 point per model, which yes, may not be much, but with their new synergy in this updated detachment can make them incredibly strong. And even Heavy Intercessors, as I said before, can now get up to strength 7 on their heavy bolt rifles instead of strength 5. So they can actually be a really viable pick. And they are also now 20 points a model, so have dropped in points a little bit as well. I'm just a huge fan of this data slate. I think it did so much for the Dark Angels that was in the right direction. It made them much more competitive, but also I think it made them much more fun and thematic to play. And I really love the fact that we've now got a load of good options. We've got a really good detachment of our own, and the lion himself, like our key centerpiece character, now feels so much more viable to take, and also, in my opinion, a lot more fun to play. So I'm a big fan. I'll put my hands up and say it. I would love to know, though, what you make of these changes, and also what else maybe you would have liked to have seen. Do you think GW has now done enough to make the Dark Angels in a good spot, or do you think they still need maybe a little bit more, or did GW give them too much? I'd love to know your thoughts on this change and this data slate for the Dark Angels specifically down in the comments below. As always, though, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me. But until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.